Okay, so yeah, thank you all for having me come and speak here today with you all. We live in Texas. We've been in Texas since 2018. I grew up in Texas, but before that, we were in the Philippines. And just to give a little background, I guess I could. Should I go? I have some slides that that I can show you guys. Should I go on and do that? I'll hit share.
That'd be great. Yep. I might need to make you host, George.
Okay.
Let me do that for you. Okay, your host.
Okay, share. Let's go here to.
Just be aware that people might pop in, and you'll now have the ability to let them in if they're in the waiting room.
Okay. Okay. If I don't see it, then be sure and feel free to interrupt me and remind me. Okay,
No problem.
Are you all seeing my screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So what you have in here in front. Okay. My background is I was an electrical engineer, ROTC, University of Texas, and went through the Navy. Was an ordnance officer on a destroyer. Then I went to an aircraft carrier in the nuclear power program, and had a strong conviction about getting out of the Navy at that time and going into full-time missionary service. Had a little bit of a delay. I went to work as an electrical engineer for 3 years coming out of the Navy, and then we went into missionary training. And we moved to the Philippines in 2006. In 2008, we moved into the tribal area. And this picture here, that's my family, there with my wife and my 3 kids. And down on the right is I'm working with some of the tribal guys. We lived out in the jungle on the island of Palawan, which is right on the border of the south, or right on the South China Sea, where we could see the fishing boats. It was before a lot of the buildup was happening, but it was still something that we were aware of. Vietnam was right across the South China Sea, and China was there. We had already been starting to hear about those kind of things. Well, my journey took me from there. We had to leave. There were 2 attempts on our family by Abu Sayyaf terrorists, a Muslim extremist group. It's in the Philippines. They came to try and kidnap us, and we had to leave on 2 occasions. It was a very dangerous situation, and it kind of took its toll on our daughters. And so after 3 years living there in the jungle with the local people, we felt like we needed to move to Manila. And when we moved to Manila, the mission asked me to help coach people on how to learn language, and then also they asked me to be the security manager for the field. And so I embarked on a journey of really studying and understanding the history of the Philippines and its relationship with the other people in the area, the local people, or the local politics, and then the international politics, how the Philippines relates to everything else in Asia. That was that role of being in international security is, I've held on to that up until this very day, although just about 3 weeks ago I resigned from my position in the operational role because I'm focusing more on the global trends. I'm still with the mission, but we are looking at, we've formed our own organization, and we're going to be doing missionary consulting with a lot of other different mission organizations on the security needs of missionaries all over the world. So, but my journey in researching a particular area of worldview trends took me, when we came back, took me across the world to this place called Burning Man, and you may have heard of it. Burning Man is this big. It's thought of as just a big party in the desert. I'm kind of curious. How many of you may have heard of Burning Man? Most people have heard of it. I think it's thought of as just this big party in the desert, but it's really a whole lot more. It's an environment where you get about 70,000 people on average every year. They go out to the middle of the desert to experience this great sensory overload and be fed this new doctrine of global unity and global oneness and spirituality and all kinds of things like this. Spirituality without religion. And what led me to researching what this was is, as I was studying the trends and the worldviews and finding out this event is like the premier laboratory for social transformation that's being pressed on Western society and on Western culture. And I didn't want to believe it at first, that it really had such an incredibly powerful influence. But as I got into it and understanding it, I found that it was true. You know, there are things like that the CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, was chosen. He was CEO for like 15 years. He made Google what it is today. He retired about 4 years ago, but he was chosen because he went to Burning Man. A lot of the things that you have on your phone, like Google Maps, were all conceived of at Burning Man. You go there, it's not just a big party, although they like it. That's kind of what the news is about it. There's actually workshops on AI and on advancements in crypto and different things going on in global finance, as well as latest technological trends, as well as things like psychedelic drugs. There's all kinds of art and all kinds of seminars on just a whole host of things. But it's a city. It's a city that they construct out in the middle of the desert. About 3 weeks before the event, they get it started. The day of the event, people go and they go in and go to the event, and then they live out the event for a week, and then it's all dismantled and it goes back to what it looks like at the end of the event. And that's, when you're out there, that's kind of a vision of what you see when you're out there, is this, all these people milling around. Most of the transportation is on bicycles. The few cars there's some maintenance vehicles, and they also have like special art cars and things like that. Now I'm going to go a little bit more into Burning Man at the end of the presentation, but I want to stop here about Burning Man because I want to talk about how this whole thing ties into the global trends that we see developing. And of course, I'm a Christian missionary, and so you're going to get the Christian perspective. Understand, this is not going to be a sermon, okay? I'm not here to tell you all how to live or preach. I just want to share with you the things I've learned and to talk about the trends that I observe and that I incorporate into my understanding of what's happening in the world. So I call this Cycles of History, Changing Times, 2025 and Beyond. And I have this quote from the book of Daniel, chapter 2, where he's answering in praise to a revelation that he received. He says, "Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him." Now, what a lot of people don't know about Daniel, he's an Old Testament Hebrew prophet, but he was also prime minister of the strongest power in the world at that time, which, when he was prime minister, was the kingdom of the Medes and the Persians under King Darius. Now, just a few years before that, when King Nebuchadnezzar had been king, and that had been the major power in the world, Daniel had also been a high court official in King Nebuchadnezzar's court. And so I think that's kind of important to remember when we talk about it, because there's been this modernist effort to push people that have faith or have a religious perspective out of the role of being able to speak, or they're only allowed to speak on world affairs or any other discipline if they choose to leave their religion at the door. And I think that's a flawed perspective. Now, I want to go through and just talk about some of the major historical turning points and what we see here. And I'm not going to read through each one of these, but as you look through, this is all before Christ. Religion and politics were just intimately wrapped together. There was no thought in the years of human history before Christ of separating political ideas from religion. And events happened that changed the course of history for multiple different reasons. But some of the ones that I picked up here, some of the ones they really had a religious component. Now in ancient time, before Christ, the one that I want to focus on, which actually is more focused on the turning of cycles, because we've got this idea of cycles that we go through in human history is very, very important for helping us to understand the changes that we're seeing in the world around us. In 201 BC, Rome defeated Carthage in the Second Punic War. Scipio Africanus was Rome's general at the Battle of Zama. And Rome became the sole hegemon of the Mediterranean. And what that did is they had faced this great power that threatened their very existence, and they won. And then they went into what was called a fourth turning cycle. And the fourth turning theory, some of you may have heard of it, some of you may have not. It's a generational theory promoted by Neil Howe. He's a demographer. He recognized a pattern that has been very prominent in our own history, and I'll share with you what that is. But what happens is every 4 generations, and a generation meaning lasts about 20 to 25 years, when the generation comes of age is when that generation turns. Okay, so every fourth generation turning, there's a major kind of crisis period. And it doesn't happen all the time for all societies, but it happened to the Romans multiple times, and it's happened in our society. In this case, this fourth turning cycle of the Roman Republic happened starting in 201 BC. That fourth turning cycle ended in 121 BC. About 80 years later, which is exactly the right amount of time, Gaius Gracchus, his older brother Tiberius Gracchus, had been killed in Rome. Gaius and Tiberius Gracchus were grandsons of the Roman general that had defeated Hannibal in the Punic War. Well, Gaius Gracchus was killed in Rome, and what happened is the Gracchi brothers had tried to implement reforms in Roman society that were so destabilizing that Rome entered a period of instability and civil wars that lasted nearly 100 years. And in 27 BC, after the last of those civil wars was finally over, and the Senate made Octavian the Augustus. He wasn't officially named emperor, but he was the first Roman emperor. There was no one left alive in Rome that had experienced the Roman Republic. And I think that's really important. There was such a significant transformation of Roman society because of the way the cycles had gone that no one was left alive that knew what the functioning republic looked like. And so that's why it became an empire. Now, if you move on past that, around that time, those first formative years of the Roman Empire is the time that Jesus Christ came. His followers claimed he resurrected from the dead after crucifixion, and of course I believe that. But over the next 700 years, he had this emergence of Christianity, and at first it was opposed by the Jewish civilization because it had come out of Judaism. Then it became dominant, and it started to become opposed by Roman paganism, and there were the persecutions, and then finally the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity, and that really established the beginning of what we think of as Christian civilization. It was an epoch of Christendom. Okay, and then there was a new power that arose, the Muslim power, that came and conquered all of North Africa and began to threaten Christianity as well, and they were stopped in Western Europe at the Battle of Tours in 732 AD. Following that, then there became these divisions. Christian civilization had these internal challenges between Eastern and Roman churches. There were other challenges. William the Conqueror came. That was not actually a religious war. That was more of a political. But that and the Black Death, that was caused by global trade. But all the other items on this really had a very, very strong religious component to them. The Reconquista, in which Well, first, the Ottoman Turks sacking Constantinople, and then the Reconquista, where the remaining Muslim political powers were kicked out of Spain. And then the next 300 years, we see this continual kind of back and forth jockeying of what the role of religion is going to be in international relations and how it affects things. And on this list, it's only the British being defeated by George Washington at the Battle of Yorktown, the American Revolution, that really didn't have a religious component. It was really political differences. And this last one, the French Revolution, and then the Paris Festival of Liberty and Reason that sparked the age of modernity, that was the first time we had a strong group of secularists that were seeking to supplant a religion that was the dominant religion, which was Roman Catholicism in France, because the French Protestants had been kicked out 100 years before that in that earlier revolution against the French Huguenots. Point is, when you look at all these events, you think, how many of these events have a religious, philosophical, and worldview component? And almost all of them do. And so I bring that up because the modernists attempt to push religion to the side and exclude the religious element of analysis. It really makes no sense in light of human history. And okay, so now I want to look at these fourth turning cycles, and I'm not going to go through all of this, but the idea of every 4 generations there's some kind of major crisis, which was identified by Neil Howe in his book, The Fourth Turning. He wrote the first book in 1997. He wrote a sequel that came out in 2023 talking about we're in the crisis period. The fourth turning period of time lasts itself. Usually the Civil War was only a very short period of time, but it can last for 20 years or so. And you go back, before the current crisis that we're in the middle of right now, we had the Great Depression and World War II, which was some 70 or 80 years after the Civil War, which was some 87 years after the American Revolution, and 90 years before that was 90 to 100 years before that was the Glorious Revolution. You can see how this has happened. This pattern has been identified and verified over and over again. We are in the middle of it, and it's a very, very strong pattern. In the fourth turning, all the institutions that govern society tend to break down. And that's a lot of what we're experiencing today. Now, on top of that, we've got this whole convergence at this particular period of time that we are experiencing right now. And this convergence is, we're seeing a technological innovation cycle that happens every 50 years. This was identified by George Friedman. Right now, we're experiencing the crypto and AI revolution. 50 years ago, it was the beginning of the personal computer revolution. 50 years before that, it was really kind of the beginning of the personal automobile revolution. And 50 years before that, it was the beginning of telecommunications with the telegraph and all that. We're also in the middle of a climate change cycle. The climate change cycle, the modern media narrative says it's caused by fossil fuels, but there's actually 2 separate astronomical cycles that are converging right at this very time. In fact, at this year. They have the sunspot cycle, which happens every 11 years, and the Gleisberg cycle, which happens every 89 to 90 years. Now, the Gleisberg cycle is particularly interesting because that was the cycle that hit the United States in the 1930s and was one of the principal causes of the Dust Bowl. We also have a revolutionary cycle that is kind of happening every 250 years. Every 250 years ago, there was the American Revolution, and 250 years before that, Martin Luther had organized a new church at the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. So we see that one happening. We're in the middle of the fourth turning cycle, which happens every 80 to 100 years. There's another one that happened over in India this year. The Kumbh Melas are something that happen every 12 years in Hindu cosmology, but the Maha Kumbh Mela is a significant one that happens every 144 years. And that's when Jupiter and the Sun and the Moon align. And this year, in March of this year, we didn't hear about it that much over here in the States, but there was 2/3 of the entire Indian population, 660 million people, went on Hindu pilgrimages. They say that that's probably the largest gathering of any civilization in all of human history. Happened this year. Now, on top of the convergence of all these things, we have for the first time in 500 years, the West does not have technological supremacy over the East. Now, that's very significant as well. Now, that doesn't mean the East is completely superior to the West. They don't have supremacy over us either. But like even during World War II, while the Japanese had some pretty good technology, they didn't have the industrial capacity to keep it going during the war. We're not facing that today. China has both the technology and the manpower and the industrial capacity. Now, it's not just China, of course. All other, there's chips and all kinds of manufacturing that's happening in the Far East. But China is the primary concern there. Now, on top of all these things, we have these epochs. I've already talked about the first two, epochs and epistemologies. And what I mean by epistemology, it's a very broad term. It just means the study of knowledge. But when I'm talking about it here, what I'm talking about specifically is how do we decide what we believe is true? So like during the epoch of Christendom, if you went and talked to somebody and they told you something, you'd say, well, how do you know that's true? They would say, well, the church says that's true. Or if they're a Protestant, they'd say Scripture says that's true. Or at some level, they would get back to, we believe it's true because God says it's true. That changed with the epoch of modernity. And there's a great effort on those who were promoting it. It started in, as I said, in 1793, that they declared in the Festival of Liberty and Reason, they declared that they were freeing humanity from the shackles of the church, is what the secularists were declaring. We're just right at the eve of the French Revolution. The epistemology that came forth from that was naturalistic determination. And if you ask someone, especially if you go ask a professor of science, you notice a lot of scientists tend to be agnostic or atheistic. And there's a lot of Christian scientists too, of course. But those who are agnostic or atheistic, they'll say, why do they believe that? Well, because they believe that because everything in their mind, you can only know what's true if you can see it and observe it in nature or take some kind of measurement. Naturalistic determination is the standard bearer of truth. Okay. So that's where they're coming from. That in the modernistic worldview. But what did modernism give us? It gave us a lot of good things, of course. It gave us the Industrial Revolution and advancements in medicine that alleviated human suffering in so many ways. But it also gave us a lot of things that were not so good. It gave us Marxism. And Marxism still holds to that epistemology, even as the world is changing. Marxism, which has caused untold suffering for millions and millions of people. It gave us fascism. It gave us 2 world wars in which we slaughtered each other on an industrial scale. So there's good sides and bad sides to it. But ultimately, when it came to the time of the Vietnam War and the generation that was coming of age at that time, the baby boomers, were saying, hey, you're saying that you can't know if there's anything real beyond this life, and then you want us to go and fight and die over in the Far East. Well, we don't want to. And we're going to look for something else. And that gave rise to postmodernism. Now, postmodernism, the problem with postmodernism is there's no consistent framework for the epistemology. The postmodern philosophy is basically, if you say that something is true, you're trying to take advantage of me by making a truth claim on me. That's kind of the essence of, very simplified essence of postmodernism. It can't last. And so it had to transition, and it had to transition to a new worldview that would become dominant. And what causes things to transition, for there to be a major transition, are when the cycles converge. When the cycles converge and it causes all kinds of human angst and often untold suffering, that changes dominant worldviews and dominant epistemologies. The current crisis period that we're in, if you just think about it, since the pandemic, I mean, all kinds of things were happening before the pandemic, But since the pandemic, we have an active hot war in Europe, an active hot war in the Middle East, regional wars in Sudan and Myanmar that are ongoing, recent wars, Iran versus Israel and India versus Pakistan. The underlying issues of that are not at all anywhere close to being resolved of either one of those wars. China is increasingly aggressive. They're supporting Russia in their invasion of Ukraine. Financially, the global financial system, which is underpinned by the U.S. dollar and by the U.S. financial system, we are at a net, NIAP stands for Net International Investment Position. We're at minus 70%. What that means is 70% of all U.S. assets, be they U.S. stocks, U.S. bonds, U.S. government bonds, U.S. Treasury bonds, U.S. corporate bonds, U.S. properties, all these different things, 70% of those are held by foreigners. That's what has propped up the stock market over the last several years. So much foreign money has come in. And what's going to happen, or what could happen, I'm not saying it's going to happen because there's ways to prevent it from happening, but what could happen in this precarious position that we're in is that if we have some kind of economic event and the dollar gets really strong, people owe debt internationally all over the world in U.S. dollars. They sell their U.S. assets to raise those dollars in order to pay their debts. And that's what causes bond market crashes, stock market crashes, and all kinds of other things. And as a result of this, the strongest point of evidence is that you see that the price of gold has decoupled from traditional finance as investors around the world are looking for this safe haven. Because now when interest rates, it used to be that when interest rates would go up at a moderate pace, gold would go down because gold doesn't draw interest. But now gold is going up regardless of what interest rates are doing. So all of this is evidence that there's major things happening in the world today. So it just kind of poses the question, do you believe the world has changed significantly since 2020? I think everyone would probably agree. Now, I'm not trying to be alarmist in this. I'm just looking at what I have observed. So now I want to go through and talk about the impact. How has the world changed and how is it changing? And what do these changes mean for our communities, our country, and our families? And this is where it's really applicable to all Americans, no matter what we are, no matter what our religion is, and why I wanted to bring this up today. There's two characteristics of the change that we're seeing. There's a change in epistemology, and that's a broad-based change. And if you talk to young people, what you'll get if you go into deep conversations with them, and I say young people, I mean, I'm 54 years old, so I mean basically 40 and below. Experience is the basis of truth. And even people my age think that. How do you argue with experience? It's not what you can measure. If I experience something supernatural through dreams or something, or through visions, or through taking psychedelic drugs, that's becomes my truth. That's the way people talk. There's also accompanying this is a change in worldview, and I'm calling this worldview re-enchantment. And it may not, historians will ultimately come up with the term of what they call it, but right now that's really kind of an accurate rendition of what this worldview is. And the reason it's re-enchantment, a friend of mine who wrote a book, a man named Carl Teichrieb, he wrote a book about this called Game of Gods, the Temple of Man in the Age of Re-enchantment. It basically outlines all these things, a lot of these things that I'm talking about. Re-enchantment is a return to ancient beliefs, and you see it in the world around you. I mean, in all your communities, just go to the grocery store and look at the people that you see with 6 different piercings in their mouth and their nose and their ears, and maybe even on their neck, or something like that, or tattoos all over. And what these are is they're seeking an experience, and they're looking to return to ancient beliefs. And I was at the grocery store a year ago, just in town, an hour away, visiting my brother-in-law. The girl had a tattoo of like an Egyptian god on her arm. I asked her, what is that? And she said, it's Anubis. She she's checking out my groceries, so I said, oh, what is it? She said, Anubis. And I said, Anubis? You mean like the Egyptian god of the dead? And she said, yes. And I said, why do you have a tattoo of Anubis? She said, well, me and my friends, we worship Anubis. And they're not the only ones. I've met people all over that if you talk to them and ask them, what is their religion and what do they think? A lot of people are going to this idea. It's a desire to experience spirituality without the trappings of religion. And when they say without the trappings of religion, what they really mean is without being bound by traditional teachings of Christianity. Because they do readily go to Hinduism, Buddhism, or these different pagan beliefs quite often. Now, why has it changed? It's changed. Why is it changing? And it's continuing to change. Is because of the net effect of the crisis period we're in. Crisis periods always bring out change. And in this crisis, with the crisis period and the convergence of cycles all happening at the same time, the changes are so significant that it's changing the whole epistemology and worldview of the way people think. And it's international. It's not just in our country. I want to talk about worldviews. There's 4 dominant worldviews in the world today. The first is the Muslim worldview, which is divided between Shia and Sunni Muslims. Second is a Chinese worldview, which is really a blend of all under heaven. Is someone wanting to ask a question? Okay.
David, do you have a question, or do you need to mute?
No, I'm going to have to beg out here. Very interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's fine. Yeah.
You got the David, it's time for bedtime for my wife. But yours is very interesting, and it gets my mind going. Please continue. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, so the Chinese worldview is a blend of this all under heaven concept. It's kind of part of the ancient Chinese cosmology, but it's integrated into this idea that the Chinese people have, that it's their destiny to dominate the world. And I base that on, there was a British naval liaison officer that went to a Chinese ship in the early 2010s, and he took a picture of a poster they had on the bulkhead that had this theme, Changxia, and showed the dragon expanding out from China. And it was clear that what they were promoting, at least with their military, that it is the Chinese destiny to dominate the world. And a lot of I've talked to a number of Chinese scholars. Some say, no, people don't think that way anymore. Others say that they do. So, but it was on the poster on a Chinese destroyer. So I think it is at least in their military. They also have this idea of the global unity under the Marxist proletariat. And they do push the whole idea that it's their destiny to become dominant to the other Asian powers. Living in the Philippines, it was clear a lot of people would talk about, well, in our history, we were under the Chinese emperor for thousands of years before the Spanish came, and we could figure out how to live that way again. That's something that is understood in Asia. The third is the Russian worldview, which is it's become more. It's expanded beyond Russia since the war, since they invaded Ukraine, which is very interesting. I didn't expect it to happen. Part of it is that this Russian Eurasian identity, where they claim that they're a unique identity, they're neither European nor Asian, but embedded within that is they're trying to push this political theory, what they call the fourth political theory, no relation at all to the fourth turning. The fourth political theory is a theory that claims that it's not fascism, it's not communism, and it's not liberal democracy. It's a fourth one, and they're inviting people to dialogue about it. And they believe that it'll bring about kind of a this one world prosperity and all nations accepting each other's differences, but also boosting the value of family and things like that. But they are criticized widely as just being fascism rebranded. And of course, the reason is they may talk about how wonderful this new philosophy is, but meanwhile, they're waging this aggressive war that's killing thousands of civilians in Ukraine as they launch missiles into hospitals and apartment buildings and things like that. So it's hard to put a whole lot of stock in that, but there are a number of people that are looking at this as, hey, this is a worldview that at least is competing with the others. Now, the Western worldview of Western liberal democracy has an epistemological base. It's our civilization, of course. It's transitioned out of Christendom as the epistemological base. But it's still in transition. It was based on modernism during the age of modernity, but that has since passed, and postmodernism hasn't stuck. Really kind of, you could probably call the end of postmodernism around 2009, right around the global financial crisis hitting. And now it's moved into this realm of re-enchantment, and it's entrenched and it's growing. And I hear it. I watched the Munich conference, and I watched I've gone to NATO seminars, NATO symposiums, things like this, and you hear people stand up, leaders of countries stand up and talk about how important it is that we all come together and that we are one people, and this is the only planet that we live on, and we have to save the planet, and the planet this and the planet that, and one people, and unite, and all these things. It's all this re-enchantment language, this desire to bring everyone into one world. And the characteristics of this worldview, which is interesting, is that one of the core beliefs is that they believe that humanity is doomed. Conditionally, humanity is doomed. We are doomed unless we all unite. Belief that mankind must unite in order to save ourselves, and that our only hope is in ourselves, and that because this is a universal thing, we have the potential to destroy ourselves and by other things. The belief that these fundamental principles are universal for all humanity, and therefore it's right to distribute this belief to all cultures and peoples. And they choose to try and distribute it through social transformation, through technology. I mean, the smartphone. When I went and visited the tribe where we served in the Philippines last year, and I heard young kids with smartphones watching YouTube and speaking English, where when I was there they could only speak their tribal language. They could barely even speak the national language. Now, this idea of it being universal, the universality of it, is really what is driving the geopolitical tensions between the Western powers and Russia, China, and Iran. And Russia, China, and Iran have made no secret about that. They believe they are fighting the ideology of the West. They come out very plainly and state that. Iran says that too. That's why Iran calls us the Great Satan. So these things are, these competing worldviews are the driving factors of these tensions. Now, I want to tell a quick story. Last year, 2024, in April, there was a full solar eclipse, and just an hour and a half away from here, in the town where my mother-in-law lives, on a ranch outside of Burnet, Texas, they set up an eclipse event where these people come from all over the country and all over the world to come and venerate the sun at the eclipse event. And they were there to venerate the sun, and it was very similar to the Burning Man event, where they had these workshops on AI and psychedelic drugs and artificial intelligence and shamanic practices and meditation teams and how to use it, looking at a mandala, things like this. They had one of the areas they had at the eclipse event, they had this thing called the space stage. And this was mostly run by civilian advocacy groups, but that are connected with SpaceX, because SpaceX, of course, is in Central Texas, and also with NASA. And I think we even had one astronaut that came and spoke at the space station. And they had multiple different seminars the entire week that we were there. And one person that stood up said this very interestingly, and you have to understand the whole premise was that these are credible people. These are not extremists. These are not people that have fringe ideas. These are credible people. They're associated. They regularly converse with the people that run SpaceX and NASA. They're kind of like the philosophical arm. They're the ones that set up the potential space tours for civilians and things like that. They said that a man stood up and he said, intelligent civilizations in the universe last around 20,000 years. And if they don't become a spacefaring species, they become extinct. Now, where did he get this information? Because to my knowledge, we've never actually met alien civilizations, and so we've never talked to them, so we don't have anyone that has actually told us this. But this is what he was saying. Okay? And he said this, and then he said, they get destroyed by one of three things. Either they destroy themselves in some way, war, or using up all their natural resources, or some other calamity, or they get conquered and taken over by an alien civilization from another planet, or their sun supernovas and destroys them. And so he said, so the hope for humanity to survive, he said, humanity is at about the 20,000 year point, because they're marking that 20,000 years ago is kind of when the first great leap in human evolution started it all. We're at the 20,000 year point, and in order for us to survive and to not go extinct, we must become a spacefaring species. That's the philosophy that's driving a lot of this. It's not the only philosophy, but it is one of them. Now, this man is a man named Bruce Damer. He was one of the speakers at the Eclipse event. He's an evolutionary biologist. He has a picture here of his the front page of one of his peer-reviewed papers. He is also kind of the lead project, I don't know if project manager or project philosopher for a thing called the Space Shepherd program, which is part of Elon Musk's plan to provide food for the colonists on Mars. Their idea is they want to put a membrane around an asteroid, use radar to stop it from tumbling, and then put water on it and then seed it with life, put fish on it and shrimp and all kinds of stuff, and then they'll send robots powered by AI and whatever propulsion means by the thousands to go back and forth to this asteroid, these different asteroids, and ferry the food back to the colonists on Mars. And he regularly meets with Elon Musk. He told us at this event that he was going to meet with Elon Musk just 2 weeks after the event, and so has influence on in this area. And where did he get his ideas? Both on his ideas on evolutionary biology. This is what he told us. I'm not telling you. He told us this. His views on evolutionary biology, how he believes that life just first formed all by itself in the original Earth, and using some of those same principles, how they're going to seed life on these asteroids. He got those ideas when he was down in the Amazon working with native shamans doing ayahuasca trips, and was entering higher dimensions and having hallucinogenic visions high on ayahuasca. That's where he got it. Now, he may seem like just one person, but he's actually one among many, because I've been at other seminars where they talk about how nearly all of the tech executives in Silicon Valley regularly participate in ayahuasca ceremonies. So this is something that is very significant that's happening in the culture around us. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Burning Man, because Burning Man, as I said, the primary tool for promulgating social change, testing social engineering theories, testing future city planning, establishing a new world view. At Burning Man in 2019, they bussed 52 mayors from major cities all over the country to see what the city planning environment looked like there, how they could implement some of those ideas in their own cities. World Bank economist named Paul Romer, a Nobel Prize-winning economist actually, went in that same year specifically on to investigate Burning Man and to see what could be learned from that. And he came back with raving reviews of Burning Man and how this is the future of what cities all over the world should look like, and they need to model everything after Burning Man. because that's where humanity's going. That's where humanity needs to go. That was his report. You can read about him in the New York Times. Just Google New York Times, World Bank economist, Burning Man, and you'll find the article. What is Burning Man? It's a system that they've put together that brings about this sensory perception that the people that go there, they're looking for energy, flow, no rules, and spirituality without religion. These are some of the ideas that are embedded within it. And to transcend the limits of humanity. And the way they believe they transcend the limits of humanity is by transgressing social norms, which is why it is actually a clothing optional event, which is, it's not like everybody is out there wandering around naked, but you see enough people doing it. And that's what they're thinking, that they are transcending the limits of humanity and they are helping the cause of humanity in the next great stage of human evolution. That's the mindset. And this mindset, there's people in all our communities that think this way, even if they don't go to Burning Man. And it does bring me back to, back in the Bible, in my studies, in the book of Genesis, where the serpent said to Eve, when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God. And there's something in humanity that wants to transcend the limits and to become like God. And that seems to be one of the driving factor behind what's going on here. So to get there, this is where it is, Black Rock Desert, northwest corner of Nevada. You have to drive there. We're leaving actually on Tuesday for this year's event. That's what it looks like most of the year, because they leave no trace. It's just barren desert. But then 3 or 4 weeks before, they go in, they build the infrastructure. People come in, they start building this whole city, and then the day of, where they open it up to everybody, this is what it's like getting in. It can take you 9 to 10 hours to get in on that line. They surge, you go to your camp. Then this was our team when we were there last year. We called ourselves the Camp of the Unknown God. We're a Christian ministry that works there, doing outreach and research while we are there. Camp of the Unknown God is a phrase that comes from the Bible in Acts chapter 17, where the Apostle Paul, St. Paul, was talking with the Greek, Epicurean, and Stoic philosophers in Athens at the Areopagus. It's an interesting study. If you haven't read it, I'd encourage you to go open your Bible and read it. This is us setting up our camp when we go there. It's a very harsh environment, of course. It's out there in the middle of the desert. This is once we get set up, we get on our bicycles and we go out and we go to see the art, go to explore, go to talk to people. A big part of why we're there is we want to talk to people, see what the way people are thinking. We go and see some of the art, what it looks like. Some of the art has messages, like that rhinoceros built out of industrial parts. The message there is how industry is destroying wildlife. Others are just fun, like the octopus cart that you see down on the left, what I showed you at the very beginning. The temple on the right is where a lot of people leave their bereavement notices for loss they've experienced. That's where they feel like they experience the most spirituality. The temple is burned at the end of the week as well. This is geopolitics are played out on the playa. This sign, I'm fine. All these signs are taken from Kiev. Every single one of them has bullet holes and shrapnel holes. Ukrainian artists put it together to send a message. This is the words I'm fine are what Ukrainian survivors text message each other after every Russian missile attack to tell their loved ones that they weren't killed. They have these seminars. The guy on the left is teaching his doctrine. A big part of the doctrine that they teach at this, which is something that you will find if you just talk to people, is the belief that God and humanity and the animals and the plants and even the earth and the mosquito and the cats and the dogs, everything is God. Everything is God. They don't believe that God is separate from creation, but God and creation are one and the same. That's a big part of the fundamental underlying philosophy driving the whole globalist shifting system. Up on the right, they're talking about there. That was a seminar on legalization of psychedelic drugs. We saw a trailer there that had a Robert F. Kennedy flag. We speculated that Robert F. Kennedy himself might have been there. Anyone that's famous that goes, they go incognito. There are famous people that go. But of course, and if you look it up, a lot of the tech Elon Musk has made it very public that he's been a regular attender at Burning Man. This is what it's like at night. You go out, you see everything. Everyone has to bring their own lights. You have to light up so you don't get run over by someone on a bicycle. It's kind of like a big party out in the desert at night. It's quite interesting. A lot going on out there. And then at the end of the week, they burn the man. The two pictures on the left are the man burning, which that's a big party. That happens Saturday night, and after the man burns, everyone runs around and has a big party, and whoop-de-doo. It's they have a great time. On the right is the burning of the temple, and that one is a solemn experience. Nobody's allowed to talk. Everyone is just really, really quiet during that time, and that's where we ended up talking with people. We have people come up to us and start crying and telling about their loss of the year, things like that. At the end of the week, the next day, everyone packs up and goes home. And when they return home, they go home with the vision for coming back the next year. Now, some have a real struggle because they have to go back to reality. They have a real struggle with what their life is going to be like. But those who can overcome that and can accept that, things they're not the same. They develop a vision for implementing the future of mankind based on what they experienced at Burning Man. And I've met a few people that have really tried to implement this. There's some people down in Austin that I'm looking to try and have a meeting with at some point that have done exactly this down in Austin at a place called Kuya. That's what, and it's all based on experience. When I talk about how the new epistemology is experience, so people go there, they experience this incredible thing, and they think that must be true because I experienced it. That's what makes it true. And they have this so they develop this committed belief in this experiential re-enchantment. That is what's going on. That's kind of is really kind of the end of my presentation here, in that but Burning Man, it encapsulates what's happening in our society and where things are going. It's kind of the main event that really puts a face on the movement. So I will finish here. Do you all have any questions? I'll back out of the presentation here. Do you all have any questions?
I have a comment.
Sure.
First of all, I think thank you for that. I'm really a lot like you, George. I enjoy finding out what opposite points of view of my own is. Mm-hmm. Thus, I can learn about me and them.
Yeah.
So I have a few people I know in my life that go to Burning Man, and they're just like you said. They're very liberal. They are atheists or agnostic, whatever, spiritual, and it's an interesting viewpoint. A lot do ayahuasca. A lot do, they're anti-establishment, anti-rules, not just with church, but just in general. And I find the society, maybe even with the younger, like you were saying earlier, under 40, believe that and going in that direction. Now, I'm sure that belief held place when we were little, too, with our parents believing that we were just as much rebels as we think younger generation is now. But when you lay it out like you did through the last couple centuries, it just shows us where we're headed. Whether you're a Christian or not, whether you're a Muslim or not, and I study Islam, I study Judaism, I understand Hinduism and Buddhism very well. I consider myself not an expert, but a person who really is very knowledgeable. And events like this can be very dangerous if you believe in it and think, like you said, that's the reality of the world, and that's where we need to go. As a matter of fact, Somerville, Massachusetts just prided itself on being one of the few cities that has considers itself a socialist city in Massachusetts, one of the first. Mm. So that's the direction we're headed, and the people who are part of that are very proud of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I just think it has so many implications because if we know the direction that we're headed, then we can understand at least where we're going and be prepared to live in it. Anybody else?
Really, the book of Revelation unfolding, if you will.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, I don't have anything else for you except that we're leaving on Tuesday to drive up there, and I think the other thing that I would bring out in this whole thing is that they are people. I mean, we go there, we talk with them. We're not there to accost them on their beliefs, just because we disagree with their beliefs. We want to be their friends. They go through a lot of the same struggles that all of us go through, so we reach out.
It looks like quite a transformative experience.
Yeah.
I know. Since we're talking, I have to go just a little bit because I'm falling asleep. So it's about my bedtime. I got to get up early to go hit it hard for the man's manufacturing machine. Right. But I would like to thank you for your insight into, you talked a lot about Burning Man, but giving perspective and history and your own passion for understanding and relaying knowledge. I found it very valuable.
Thank you.
And I'm going to go do a little research on Burning Man. I like some of the aspects of the looking out past our own human conditions for the possibility of change in a positive manner. I tend to be progressive. I do tend to be a centrist. I want good things for people, and I want good things out of the future. Yeah. And when you look around the world, you see so many individuals and groups and organizations and governments taking advantage of the people. They'll kill them, oppress them, deprive them of their rights, take their money, make life very difficult to live. When you look at, most individuals and groups of people are just trying to, they're just trying to have a reasonable life. They're just trying to live in this world and find meaning. And some people can be selfish. Some people like yourself are very giving and looking out beyond themselves and what can they do to make things better for them. And this was very important information. I never really understood the cycles. I've heard it in history. I've heard it from other people and learned people that, when you look at the big aggregate and timelines, you can see these cycles that form. And there's upheaval and then there's rest. And there's upheaval and then there's rest. And it certainly seems like we're in the cycle of upheaval. There's a lot of freaking chaos just blowing around our heads, and people are trying to say, what the hell is going on? Well, you have added a little bit of understanding. And of course, it's in our own internal experiences, whether we believe it or not, or
right.
But I found it very stimulating, and it moves me to go find out what's about Burning Man, and then, I can't really tell. I don't know. It's not really a vacation. I think people make it like a pilgrimage, like you're going to Mecca.
Yeah, that's right.
It's very similar.
Yep.
You're going to find that experience, that spirituality. And whether you're going with, looking for God, or want God to interact with you, or just want to experience or interact with like people, I think it's very much a pilgrimage. I don't want to call it an American pilgrimage, because probably people from all over the world come to Burning Man.
Yeah, that's true.
What a logistical event.
Yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for your time and effort, because that was very
good. Thank you.
it sparks my imagination to go and look and listen to them.
Okay. Good. Very good. Thank
Did
you.
you find, is there much interest in Christianity during your outreaches?
Yes, there is, but it's selective. It's selective. I mean, the vast majority of people are not. The majority of people that you talk to, they're actually, a lot of them are there to get away from Christianity. They're looking to escape. But a lot of people, the people that end up coming and talking to us, they get to this point where they realize they're there, and then they think, they're telling us all these things, but I don't actually believe it. And then they see us, and they're like, hey, there's Christians. What do they think about this? And so they come and talk to us. We've had a number of people come to us, ask for prayer, come to our morning devotions, ask for, even people that came to faith because they were there and then they met us. So that's the outreach, the evangelical side of things, and we love doing that.
Yeah.
Well, just a quick comment that came to my mind said you're part of the tapestry that is that whole event.
Yeah.
It's not you're not the proponent, you're not the one driving it.
Right.
The great change and understanding, but you have every right to be there and interact with people, and that I can see how you would be an important part of it. You're not trying to force anything, but
right.
You add perspective, and people, they're looking for touchstones of reality and points of intersection that make sense. And, well, gosh, Christianity's been around for such a long time, and it's very ingrained in the American culture. But Jim, just maybe you should take a recruiting to Burning Man.
Yeah.
I bet you get a lot of people who come to our World Wars group here.
Yeah.
We could get them in the MOWW.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a question, George. So I find, to be honest with you, and this is true on any topic, but in this particular topic, when I talk to someone not in the big three, meaning Muslim, Jew, and Christianity, if I ask them questions about their own belief, what does work for me is, and obviously it doesn't work for them, they tend to question their own belief.
Mm.
So rather than defend Christ, which is what I want to do by default,
Yeah.
I ask them to explain Buddhism.
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, George, they can't explain it, or it's only their viewpoint and another Buddhist has a different viewpoint, or they want to argue, meaning and pick apart Christianity, and I won't let it go there.
Yeah.
And that tends to work for me because I allow them to express whatever belief they have, and then I ask them questions about that belief, as if their faith was strong, and just like you and I, and they had the answers. But 9 times out of 10, they don't.
Yeah.
And I think it's a result of they're just seeking something other than what society offers them.
Yeah.
And ayahuasca and all this is the answer, at least for now.
The fundamental core difference is whether or not you believe God is separate from creation or God and creation are one and the same. And that's the idea that God and creation are one and the same is a thread that runs through paganism and the mystical forms of Islam, like Sufism, and even the mystical forms of Judaism, Hinduism, different forms of animism, and even a lot of agnosticism and things where they just want to have some kind of perennial philosophy that doesn't ascribe to any one particular supernatural belief. But the idea that God and creation are one and the same is where they come from. And of course, in the Christian belief, in Christian civilization and our theology, God and creation are separate. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And God loves his creation. He entered his creation by sending his son, but he is separate from his creation. And so I am not God, and you are not God, and the dog is not God, and the cat is not God, cat might think he's God, but the the chair is not God. But that idea that we're all the same substance means that we can all unite and all believe that we're all God. That's where it comes from.
And to go further, to quote what Jesus said, is my kingdom is not of this world.
Mm-hmm.
He made that abundantly clear to the Pharisees when they asked him,
Yeah.
who do you say you are? Where are you from? Why aren't you coming in on your high horse? And when he said that, that explicitly told us that he is definitely not one of us. Yeah. And that speaks to what you just said. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, and some point maybe I'll share what we went through at Burning Man this year, because we're going back next week. So
that'll be great, George. We really appreciate you. Thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone here who's stayed on, and despite my mishap there on the time, I'll be home again next month, so I'll be fine. And I'll pick a date for our next speaker, which I am hoping is Jim Littleton from the Ancient Honorable Artillery Company. Again, thank you very much for everyone. Quick prayer and a benediction, if you would bow your heads. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for George. Thank you for explaining us everything about Burning Man, as well as the culture, our society. Thank you very much for these great people, and for our understanding, and perhaps our need for more as we continue to go about your word. In this we pray. Amen.